Ferrari absolutely dominated the United States Grand Prix and took a 1-2 finish as Lando Norris and Max Verstappen once again had issues on track. But now F1 is moving on to the next race, which is in Mexico for the Mexican Grand Prix, which means that once again it is time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing and then at the end of the video giving out my early predictions. If you enjoyed the video then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now let's get into the video. As usual, I'll be talking about the top teams later on, so please do stick around for that. Yep, F1 is now moving on to Mexico after a fantastic race at the Circuit of the Americas, and Mexico is a completely different track to what we have just raced at, meaning we could see something different yet again. Mexico is also the highest race in terms of altitude of the year, meaning that despite the circuit featuring a very long straight and some high-speed corners, the teams and drivers will actually be running with as much downforce as they can possibly get away with. Even though they are running a lot of downforce, expect the teams to reach top speeds of over 350 km per hour. How is this really possible? Well, because of the higher altitude, the air density is lower, and therefore there is not as much drag being produced because there's not as much air. The altitude also means that the engines do produce a little bit less power. However, with the turbos and the energy recovery systems, the engine power loss has been somewhat mitigated over the years. This does mean that we do sometimes see different performance levels from the power unit suppliers though. In the last couple of years, Honda powered cars have had an advantage, which was highlighted by how strong AlphaTauri were last year, with Daniel Ricciardo qualifying in 4th place. Alongside the high-speed corners and long straights, there is also a very tight section inside the stadium where the majority of the fans will be. For the Mexican Grand Prix, Pirelli will be once again returning to the softest tyres in the range, meaning that the C3 will be the hard tyre, the C4 will be the medium tyre, and the C5 will be the soft compound of tyre. Even though it is the softest tyres in the range, tyre wear is not actually that high around this circuit, and you can see that as last year there was a total of only 27 pit stops, with the majority of drivers going from the medium to the hard tyres. There was a few 2 stops, but in general medium to hard is the way to go. Much like we saw in Texas, I anticipate that we will see another 1-stop race with the drivers going from mediums to hard tyres. With the very long back straights and the drivers running with maximum downforce, you would think overtaking would be pretty easy, but that's not the case, and last year there was a total of only 48 on-track overtakes. The reason for this is, with the thinner air, slipstream is not as powerful as at other circuits. To help with overtaking, the circuit does feature 3 DRS zones. One down the pit straight into turn 1, the second DRS zone is on the exit of turn 3 into turn 4, and the final DRS zone is on the exit of turn 11 into turn 12. Last year, the pole position lap time was a 1 minute 17.116, and that was set by Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. During that lap, Leclerc reached a top speed of 351 km per hour. In the Grand Prix itself, the fastest lap was set by Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, and that time was a 1:21.334. This year, I expect that both times will be beaten, especially if we do get a safety car, which allows for a multi-stop race. I just want to say, if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the midfield teams. The midfield battle in Texas was an incredible fight. We saw some fantastic racing as Liam Lawson and Franco Colapinto once again were impressing with great racing and proving why they should both be on the grid next year. Pierre Gasly had a fantastic first stint in the Alpine as well, before a slow pit stop essentially brought his race to an end. And going into the next race at Mexico, I anticipate that V-Carb are going to be very strong. Like I said last year, Daniel Ricciardo was 4th in qualifying, and this could be another strong weekend for them, especially now Liam Lawson has a fresh power unit to use for the remainder of the season, and Yuki Tsunoda will be looking to impress as he desperately wants a test in the Red Bull car. For Mercedes, it was a great recovery drive by George Russell to go from the pits to 6th place and beating Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. But teammate Lewis Hamilton had a shocking race which came to a very early end when Hamilton lost control of his Mercedes and ended up in the gravel. This was pretty bad and definitely a weekend to forget for the 7 times world champion. Going into Mexico, Mercedes will be looking to bounce back and score some good points. It has historically been a decent place for them, but they have to work if they want to be any better than the 4th fastest team this weekend, because the top 3 teams are starting to pull away from them. For Ferrari, they absolutely dominated the United States Grand Prix, as Charles Leclerc comfortably beat Verstappen in the early stages, taking the lead at turn 1, and Carlos Sainz eventually managed to get past Verstappen in the pit stops, and Ferrari are looking very comfortable. Those new upgrades that they brought a few races ago have really brought them back to the front, and they are looking very happy now. They are just 8 points behind Red Bull for 2nd in the Constructors' Championship, and only 48 points behind McLaren for the lead of the Constructors' Championship, and Charles Leclerc is only 22 points behind Lando Norris for 2nd place. Last year, Leclerc managed to take pole position, and despite a collision with Perez at the start of the race, Leclerc finished in 3rd place, so Ferrari will be confident that this could be another strong race for them. They also tend to be stronger on the softer tyres, and with this weekend Pirelli bringing the softest tyres, then we should see another Ferrari car on the podium. For Red Bull, they did not have the race pace in the Grand Prix compared to what they showed in the sprint race, as Max Verstappen couldn't do anything about Ferrari and was under pressure from Lando Norris in the McLaren, and did lose the place to Norris, but of course Norris got a penalty, even though neither driver actually made the corner. But one thing that was positive for Red Bull is that they look to be back with Verstappen, and Mexico has historically been a very strong track for them. They have won every single race from 2017 to 2023, apart from 2019, and the Honda power units tend to be very strong here. Sergio Perez had a shocker at Texas, getting beaten by George Russell despite the fact Russell started from the pit lane, and well, he's going to need to try and find a way to improve, especially as it is his home race, and I do think he will have a little bit of a better race, but I think he's still going to struggle for a top 5 finish. And finally, for McLaren, the United States Grand Prix was not a great weekend for them, and for me, it pretty much ended any hopes of Lando Norris winning the Drivers' Championship this year without Max Verstappen suffering a DNF of some kind. The new upgrades have potentially not worked as McLaren were hoping, and if that is the case, then I do wonder if they will look at potentially reverting back and taking the upgrades back off. They are still at least very likely to win the Constructors' Championship, as they do have a healthy gap over Red Bull, who are most of the time racing with one arm tied behind their backs. But if Ferrari do continue to become more of a threat and an issue for them, then they will probably not be able to settle with what they currently have. Lando Norris had a very strong Grand Prix, despite losing the lead at turn 1 once again. He did come back and eventually did get past Verstappen, but a penalty to Lando Norris ended any hopes he had of finishing on the podium. Oscar Piastri didn't really have the pace this weekend, and it wasn't really a good weekend for him. Sprint and the main Grand Prix just were not strong enough. Mexico should be better for them, but like I said, they are coming under threat now from Ferrari as well as Red Bull. So what are my early predictions for the Mexican Grand Prix? Well, I think that the top midfield team and midfield driver will be Liam Lawson in the VCARB, especially now Liam Lawson has some fresh power unit parts to use until the end of the season. But now, what about pole position in the top 5? Well, for pole position, I am going to go for Max Verstappen in the Red Bull to take pole position. But what about the top 5 in the Grand Prix? Well, I think in P5 it will be Oscar Piastri in the McLaren, P4 will be Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, P3 will be Lando Norris, P2 will be Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, and I think Max Verstappen in the Red Bull will win the Grand Prix and finally end his Grand Prix drought. But those are my thoughts. The question is, what do you guys think will happen? In the comment section down below, please do let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.